All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome. What fun to see this crowd for our first event. Phil, you can have a seat. I'm Barry Shiffman, director of the competition. I think I know most of you. How many are here for the first time? Welcome. Look to your left, look to your right. Those that have been here before, those are your mentors. And there are things that they know that you need to know. How to navigate this campus. Where are the washrooms that most of you don't know about that are hidden? Where is the better coffee? All of that stuff, the important stuff. We are thrilled that this lecture series, supported by Sandra and Ernie Green, is possible. I think it's become a really important part of the week. So first of all, thank you to Sandra and Ernie. One very quick housekeeping thing. Tomorrow's lecture is at? 9 o'clock. Exactly, 9 o'clock. And we are going to start, as we did today, at exactly 9 o'clock. If you get here late, you can enter by that door, so you'll still be able to get in. We're going to start the concerts at exactly the published time. Otherwise, what is our 7-day event will be 8.2 days, and that doesn't work. It's an extraordinary pleasure and honor to have Philip Setzer, both as our juror and then for this roast. But just very quickly, what I wanted to do today is to give you a little bit of insight into the life of our artist and into what motivates Phil for what is a career that is, it's hard to describe how irrational the commitment is of string quartet players to their art. So I want to put some stuff in context. Phil, how long have you been in the Emerson Quartet?
Well, the quartet was officially formed in 1976. So
that's a very typical quartet answer.
Years. 43 years. But as you know, Gene and I played in a quartet which became the Emerson Quartet. And we met in 1969 and formed a student quartet in 1970. So next year, Gene and I will have been playing in a quartet together for 50 years.
Okay. So now...
And I'm only 60, so that's...
Okay. So we know the Emerson... How many have heard the Emerson Quartet live in concert? Excellent.
Wow.
Okay. If you haven't heard them live in concert, maybe these numbers are off because they keep winning things. But 9 Grammys, Gramophone Awards, A.V. Fisher Prize, incredible career. Now, they definitely don't need to play concerts to build their career anymore. I think after 46 years and 9 Grammys, they do concerts because they choose to do these concerts. But I want to give you an idea.
They're still paying off student loans.
They're still paying student loans, exactly. To put context into what sort of career this is for Phil, in addition to being a member of the Emerson Quartet, he's on the teaching faculty of Stony Brook University in Long Island. He's a new faculty member at the Cleveland Institute in Cleveland, making multiple trips there each term, teaching violin, teaching chamber music, the city from which he comes. He plays in a piano trio outside of the Emerson Quartet with the former cellist of the Emerson, David Finkel, and pianist Wu Han. We'll soon hear about his creative practice outside of actually playing violin in the string quartet and some of the theatrical projects. But just to give you an idea of what is on his plate, and I don't want to give you any nervous jitters because we both know you're not able to practice this week. Okay, very quickly.
Don't send that to Australia where I have to play.
Well, I was just going to say, Sydney, Australia. Here we go. 7th of September, Sydney, Australia, 9th. Newcastle, the 10th. Perth, the 12th. Melbourne, the 14th. Canberra, the 16th. Melbourne, the 17th. Adelaide, the 19th. Brisbane, the 20th. No, 21st. This is where it gets interesting. Belgrade, Serbia, the 1st of October. Austria, the 2nd. Switzerland, Ascona, the 4th. Now this is, I love that. So on the 4th, you're in Switzerland. On the 12th, you're in Sleepy Hollow, New York. Then Massachusetts on the 13th. Stony Brook University on the 15th. New York City the 17th, East Lansing the 18th, Worcester, Ohio the 20th, Cincinnati the 21st, Pasadena the 27th, and not to forget Canada, Vancouver on the 29th. So by the end of October, those are the published concerts on the Emerson Quartet website. Now remember, in addition to that, 2 faculty appointments. So all those days in between, that's a very early morning flight and a full day. I know what that's like for you. It's teaching morning to night and somehow practicing and somehow dreaming up projects. So I think what I took away from all of this is that the craziness, the love of this repertoire is what drives most of the quartet players that I know. And to be able to get a block of time in your schedule to come here is a real gift to us. So again, thank you for that.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And since this is the first event of a week of music, a week that celebrates the string quartet, I thought maybe just to put everything in perspective, let's start this chat with listening to just a couple minutes of the Emerson Quartet. So we'll hear the first track, Blair. Well,
I haven't heard that probably since we recorded it.
I think most of you probably know that's the Cavatina, right, from Opus 130. And if anybody needs convincing that the greatest music ever written was for string quartet, it's a pleasure to share those things with you, because we could do that all afternoon. But that, I know that for you, Beethoven is an enormous part of your life
Yeah,
and your
of course.
career.
Yeah.
And
Interesting. I remember what I remember about the recording of that movement. Of course, this was when Beethoven was asked what his favorite piece of music was that he had written. He said the Cavatina, and actually the manuscript of the Cavatina has stains on it that they have now, I think, proven are his tears, from writing it. What I remember is that we did a take. We're going to record the Cavatina, so that's like already we're like nervous wrecks about it, because it's like one of the iconic pieces of music. And so we get there, we do a take of it, we go in and listen to it, and of course we hate everything, and big discussion, and there's too much time here, and for about 20 minutes we talk about what we don't like. We go in, we do take 2, come back and listen to it, it's better. Still things we don't like, We go back, I think we did 4 takes, that's what I remember. And then we fixed like the last note or something it didn't quite taper right, or there was some noise or something. And what you just heard, which is interesting to me, almost the entire recording, I mean, what's on there as the recording is take two. Wow. All the little timing things that we talked about from the take one that we weren't happy with, and the dynamics, and we fixed. When we did take three and take four, all those little things were just slightly then too much. So it's like we started here, here's the line that we wanted, or we thought we wanted, or anyway, what you heard. And then take two kind of crosses this way, and then take three is like here, and take four is here. And at the time, I had no idea. Yeah. You know, we thought it was just getting better and better, right? But there's almost nothing of take three and four or take one, and that's almost entirely that one take. And it's just strange. It's strange to hear it now, because there's something. What I like about it, what I heard, is that it sounds very natural. You know, it doesn't sound like it was. Yeah, it doesn't brilliant. Sound like what we were going through trying to record.
So, you know, I got to know Phil originally in the first year of the formation of the St. Lawrence Quartet. So we formed in '89, and we spent our first year with Dennis Broad, who will be talking to you tomorrow. And then we were looking where we were going to study after that year. So we'd only actually been together, this is around January of '90. We've been together about 4 months. We're not very good. We're crazy. We're not very good. And we're asking Dennis, where are we going to go to study? And we're looking at the various programs. And then suddenly there's this announcement that there's a new program. The Emerson Quartet has just announced, University of Hartford, Hart School of Music, Quartet in Residence. And we make an application, and I think Dennis probably pulled some strings. And so we moved to New York to study with Phil and with the others in the Emerson. And I think, you know, the schedule I read to you today, actually in those days, that first year you did 130 concerts the year that we moved to New York. And even with that crazy schedule, there was a real commitment to taking care of us, to mentoring us, to sharing this music. And even beyond what happened in the lessons and in the coachings, there was a real concern that we were okay making this transition to live at that time in New York. But I remember very much the idea of recording. The idea of recording still terrifies me, and the St. Lawrence Quartet resisted recording for years and years and years. And you and David and I remember you and David specifically said, you know, we're going to be making this recording of Ives, string quartets, and I think it would be good for you to come and, well, two things. Selfishly, you can come before we do, and you can play on the stage so they can do some mic setting before we get there, and then you could observe the recording process. And I think your intent was to demystify and remove the fear from the young St. Lawrence Quartet to what it is to record. The problem is that you were just so bloody good that day. So we schlep up to the Arts and Letters in Harlem, and we go, and you guys, I still remember this, I guess, you arrived, you tuned, you sat down, you played through the Ives Quartet, and it was bloody perfect. Like, it was just like, I'm like, well, yeah, if we could do that, recording wouldn't be scary. But, so, what I think, you know, we took, I never shared this with you, but we were more terrified about recording after that than, we didn't, it was years till we went back to the idea. And that, I think that recording is one of the great recordings you did.
Thank you.
It's an amazing recording. But I'm really curious. I think it's not just specific to the Emerson. I think the string quartet medium is filled with these passionate people wanting to share this craft and this love of this art. But I want to hear about what that is in your life, the mentoring, the teaching, why you're doing it, to the degree you are. What drives you?
I think, in a nutshell, you know, listening to you talk about all these things that we do or have done, it's all kind of a blur, you know, because I mean our lives are like that. You know, you think about all the things you do in your life, and you have specific memories. And I remember hearing recently a a talk about memory, about how you file things away and you take certain things out. And everything is filed there, but you also edit your files, your memory files to some extent. Sometimes to make things look better, sometimes to make things look worse. But it's a very interesting process, the way we draw on memory. I think the one thing that is consistent in terms of all these things that you say I did is that, generally speaking, I've loved doing it, and I know that the quartet loves doing that, and teaching is just, it's not a separate entity. It's something that we were extremely fortunate to study with these great musicians. David Finkel studied with Rostropovich. I started with my dad. I studied with Joseph Gingold for a couple of years, and then Raphael Durian, the concertmaster in Cleveland. Went to New York to study with Oskar Shumsky, where I met Gene. And Gene had worked, studied longer time with Shumsky. Larry studied with Lillian Fuchs. We've had, and then on the chamber music side of it, working mostly with Robert Mann at Juilliard. But all the people that and then not just that kind of teaching, but also then playing with older musicians when we were young. People, playing so much with Menachem Presser and recording with him. He was another teacher, really. And he's the last time we played with him a couple of years ago, and he's like 90 something, and he's still telling me how to play.
No, I have to interject, because so you mentioned playing with Malcolm, and he's still telling. Let me paint a picture here. So the St. Lawrence Quartet, later on we get a job. We're at Stanford. We have this wonderful position, and the Emerson Quartet are coming to perform at Stanford University with Menachem. So we're just so excited. Our teachers are coming to our neck of the woods now, and we're so excited. And so we clear out our big rehearsal studio, and the Emerson are going to be in our studio rehearsing with Menachem. We're thrilled. And so we organize the stands, and everything's great, and welcome Menachem in, and then we leave them, and we're practicing in other rooms, doing our stuff. And I walk by the room like an hour later, and I swear to you, I hear Menachem yelling at the Emerson Quartet. And I just walk by, like, what the hell is going on? Like, it's intense. So, okay, I walk by like 45 minutes later, and I still hear Menachem, And then I was really upset. I thought, something's wrong. There's going to be problems with the concert. My wife was working as head of performing arts. I called her. I said, Robin, I had something that I don't have a good feeling about this. Something's not right. And then guys walked out of the room all smiling, and I'm like, what? I don't remember. One of you said, maybe it was you, just said, yeah, we need that every 6 months.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he's both one of our biggest supporters and one of our toughest critics. Yeah. But that's what you want. You want somebody, maybe not quite that much, but you want somebody who is going to be honest with you and not tell you that, oh, that sounds great, But I think getting that kind of information from people like him, playing with Leon Fleischer, playing with Rostropovich, and that week that we spent with Rostropovich recording the cello quintet was just one of the high points. And you think you're going to come back to that and spend time with him later, and we didn't really. That was sort of it, But what we got from these people, I really believe this. It's not just something to say to kind of be falsely modest. I think that we all of the musicians, the jury members here, my friends, I'm sure feel the same way. We have a responsibility, I know you feel this way, to pass on this information. This is such valuable information that these people who, sure, maybe they needed the money to do some teaching, but that's not why they taught, and that's not why they told us all these things. And they were passing information down from the generation before them. Robert Mann, studying the Bartók quartets with him, talking about how he had played for Eugene Lehner, who had played for Bartók, and then working with Felix Gallimir at Marlborough, who knew, look at the deer back there. You can come in. We have a lot of those in New Jersey,
Yes,
too.
you do.
You can't go out in the back because of the deer ticks. But anyway, Felix Gallimir knew Webern, he knew Berg, he knew Schoenberg. And, I remember asking Felix once at lunch in Marlborough, I said, so tell me about them. What were they like as people? And so he said, well,
Yeah,
that's great. And he's eating his lunch, and he says, well, you say good morning to Berg, and Alban comes running across the street like a big puppy. He jumps on you, he hugs you, he kisses you, and then runs off. And then you see Weber, and you say, good morning, Anton. He goes, oh, not so loud, not so loud. And then, what about Schoenberg? He said, good morning, Herr Doctor. He says, what do you mean by that? So, there was like 30 seconds, of a biography of the New Viennese school, And I remember asking Rostropovich, riding in the car to the airport, he was sitting in front of me, and I said, the same thing. I leaned forward and said, Slava, tell me about Prokofiev and Shostakovich. Tell me, what were they like? You knew them. You knew them. Tell me, what were they like? And so he says, Prokofiev, I can't do a good imitation of Slava. It's very hard. But Prokofiev, like father to me, like uncle. I live with him, And Shostakovich, Prokofiev is so good to me, and Shostakovich, great friend. But Shostakovich, not such nice person. and then he like slumps down in the seat and goes to sleep, and I'm like, that was it, So I have these two little bits from Felix Gallimir and Rostropovich about, but that's the kind. Those are little stories to tell everybody. But the information that those people, those pedagogues, those teachers that I was lucky enough to work with, growing up in Cleveland, going to hear the Cleveland Orchestra every week, hearing George Zell conduct.
Both your parents were?
Both my parents played in the orchestra. Hearing those great soloists come through every week, one great Mozart piano concerto, and the next week Oistrakh would come and play Brahms, and the next week, it was just that kind of education. So I am so fortunate to have all this information. How can I not? What am I going to do with it?
Well,
I've got to pass that on. So
thank goodness for us. I'm thinking back to our time with the Emerson. It was so much more than just sharing music. It was, probably half of the engagements we got were because one of those guys picked up the phone and called the presenter and said, we've got this really interesting young quartet. Or you would invite us, I remember, to play Mendelssohn Octet. We would join them in various places. And the amount you learn just by sitting beside somebody that is that good and that experienced and that generous really is remarkable. And I wanted you to get an idea of what it is to work. It's the most extreme, serious work possible, as you can imagine, studying these complex scores. But it's incredibly fun, or can be incredibly fun. And I think your quartet has always balanced that. Luckily, we found this great clip. Let's watch the next video, Blair. We'll get a little insight into life in the...
This is going to be embarrassing.
No, it's not just...
Wait. No, I'm not going to do it like that. Are you sure?
You're not going to do it like that,
not.
Usually in quartets, they refer to the first violinist as the leader of the quartet.
I'm the leader.
Yeah. Wait, I'm sorry, it's always a violist.
It's always a
No,
leader.
he's not. No, there's no leader. And in fact, we don't vote. We come to an agreement. So I was doing this weird brain going.
Oh, I see.
Ooh, that's fancy. You really did that? I never
Yeah.
did that.
There are many things in rehearsals which actually are kind of unspoken, because actually I think most of what we do in rehearsals is listen to each other.
Gene and I, when we started as students, we were switching on the violin parts. We both liked playing both parts. And we just basically decided that we wanted to continue that.
This past May, after 34 years of the same membership, we had the great privilege of welcoming Paul Watkins to our group.
There are pieces we're relearning with Paul.
Okay, that's your cue.
The most important thing is to try to imagine what the composer wanted. And with Shostakovich, his music often has a fairly simple sounding surface, and beneath that there may be layers of irony and references.
The theme is definitely a deadpan.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's like Suzuki playing or something.
Why is it? Does it have to be played like that? Is that just because
We said.
the borrowed? We said that.
It is up for interpretation, this music. That's what makes it great.
When it explodes, it's so shocking. Because you really don't think this piece is going to go there. And he was such an admirer of Chekhov. It comes from Chekhov. It's these scenes in Chekhov where nothing seems to be happening. It's all just kind of small talk, you know. And then, you know, later in the second act, something really horrible happens. One of the biggest compliments ever given to us was that when they hear us play, they hear the music first, and then they're aware of what we're doing, but they hear the music first. That's really
it. That's it.
That's it.
The music and what a string quartet is, it's bigger than the individuals.
Yeah, the music's the boss. Look at that, I'm playing Bartok with the Emerson Quartet. Isn't that cool?
So am I.
How cool is that? I can't believe that.
That's great.
It's good. This is a good piece to play in someone's living room, actually. It looks like you might have created it in a salon somewhere in Budapest.
So, I mean, that's just a little glimpse, but I think it's a pretty honest one. The kibitzing around the kind of the banter, the confidence that they all have, I think is at the core of what that group is. You mentioned in there Chekhov, and I want to just take some time. So, in addition to those bazillion concerts and the teaching and playing in the trio and having a family and all the rest of that, you also are interested in artistic creation beyond just the string quartet. So. Phil's wife is an actor, Linda, and maybe that's where the inspiration comes from. I don't know, but two projects that I want to touch on. One is The Noise of Time, which was a remarkable project at Lincoln Center. Actually, Janice Price, our president, was, I believe she was head of marketing at the time, communication, when that was happening. We've talked about that. So that was with the Theatrical and was conceived, as I read, really from you, right? So, or you were involved in it wasn't show up
the
and play.
original idea was mine, but the way that it was developed and created was Simon McBurney with the quartet.
And so tell us about that project. What did that look like?
Well, I should just say I've been involved in helping to create two projects around Shostakovich. One is The Noise of Time, with Simon McBurney and Complicité, and the second one is, which we've just been doing in the last couple of years, is called Shostakovich and the Black Monk, which is a Chekhov story, and I'll get to that in a second. But I think when I was at Juilliard, this is long before I knew Linda, and I was involved in a couple of collaborations with other parts of the school. When I went to Juilliard, it was the very first year of Juilliard being at Lincoln Center. And it was also very early on with the drama department there. So I played the violin in a performance of L'Histoire de Soldat that James Conlon conducted, and David Ogden Stiers played the devil, and a very quiet but very effective young actor played the soldier, and I always, like a few years after that, I was like, I can't remember who that was. And I went back and I found the program. It was Kevin Kline. And I remember he was very shy and kind of, not shy, but just very quiet, but he was terrific. Anyway, that's back in the, early 70s already. I was interested in kind of bringing things together, not just music here and drama there and dance there. And I was also dating Janet Elber at the time, who's now the head of the Martha Graham Company. So I was sort of, and I would love to go to, I've always loved to go to rehearsals, whether they're musical rehearsals, but especially when they're drama or dance. I learn a lot from that, and I would do that at Juilliard. Yeah. So I think there was an interest from way back about trying to do that. The other part of it with Shostakovich is that having played the pieces often and we recorded them live partly for this reason. I've always felt that they are like plays. They're like these four-person. That's why I make the reference in that film about Chekhov, because there is an element of that. And the violin talks a little bit, and then the viola talks a little bit, and a couple of people are just kind of holding a note. And it's very similar to some of the scenes you see in Chekhov, where, as I said, there just nothing seems to be happening, and that's part of his invention, the realism of Chekhov. And so rather than thinking of creating a theater piece, how it came about was really looking at the music and the theatricality that I think is inherent in Shostakovich's music, and then building something from that. So The Noise of Time, one of the big decisions that I made was that it should be based on the 15th quartet, the last quartet, which I don't know if you know the piece, but it's
the happiest.
It's 5 adagios and an adagio molto, right? It's an incredible work of art, though, but very, very sad and extremely, really kind of the elegy that he writes for himself. But it worked well in terms of looking back on it, and I won't go into the whole thing the way that worked, but I think if it worked, it's because it came out of the music. And the same thing with Shostakovich and the Black Monk. He wanted to write another opera. He got into a lot of trouble with Lady Macbeth of the Mtsensk district, and thought his life was over, and probably was very close to being literally over because of that. There was a big article in the Pravda, front page of Pravda, translated "Muddle, not music." If not written by Stalin, it was directed by Stalin to be written, and just horrifying, because up to that point Shostakovich was very successful, and then suddenly he was persona non grata and really expected, the knock on the door every night. He had a suitcase packed, ready to go to prison. Didn't happen because Stalin was smart enough to realize that he could use Shostakovich, and was better to keep him alive and use him rather than. So there was this, ongoing cat and mouse game, which went even after Stalin died. But the Black Monk is I don't know if you know this story. Most people don't know the Chekhov short stories, but it's a very strange story, and what's interesting about it is why he found it fascinating enough to write an opera about it. And we don't have time to go into all of that, but you should read this story. And I think, again, this is sort of a jumping off point, but I think that at least the 14th quartet, I think there's a lot of music in that quartet that was in his head for the opera. So that's sort of the jumping off point. We take the 14th quartet, we play the first movement of it as the overture before anything happens, before any actors are on stage. 7 actors come out. the play interweaves Shostakovich trying to create the opera, trying to tell the story. Stalin keeps appearing, and in a horribly funny way sometimes, and sometimes just horrible way, impedes his path. Right. And at the same time, the actors do tell the whole story. They act out the whole story, and we interweave music of Shostakovich, and also the Angel Serenade of Braga, which Chekhov makes reference to 2 or 3 times in the story. So we know that Shostakovich was going to use that in the opera because we have an arrangement of it that he made. So we make our own arrangement for quartet, and one of the actors sings, and it keeps coming back. So there's these elements, but it's all coming out of the music. I think that's, for me, that was why it was interesting and why it works.
Does your view of the piece or your sense of time, I mean, the sense of timing of an actor on stage is one thing. The sense of timing in music is another thing. And I'm curious whether you had to adjust any of your interpretation of whatever the specific music was to deliver an effect to the audience in the context of all the rest, right?
Absolutely, sure. I mean, in Simon's piece, in Noise of Time, we come out on the stage at the beginning. There's one of the actors pretends to be from the BBC, and then they're going to make a recording of it. So he's telling the audience to be quiet, and then he says, "Okay, now just so we can check the levels, could everyone applaud?" And he directs. It's this fascistic scene that everybody sitting in the audience thinks it's BBC, but it's actually, it's all written, and one of the actors is doing it, and it's about crowd control, mind control, and which plays a big part in the piece. And then he motions to the quartet. We come out and we sit down on this platform. The piece starts with a second violin beginning, a slow fugue. Gene plays second in it, and so he goes to play the first note, and the lights go out, completely black out. And we disappear for about 45 minutes. Mm-hmm. You don't see us again. And then everything is played out. It spins back in time with the radio and telling this Shostakovich's story. And then it comes back. It works its way back in time to later, and the scrim goes up, and we're standing in the back of the stage, and we start again the 15th quartet, and this time we play the whole piece, but standing, including David standing playing the cello, and we move. There are parts where we in the waltz, for instance, we're actually doing a slow waltz as we play. We end up on this platform, and the platform moves very slowly down stage, so that at the very end of the piece, when we're holding the chord, we're actually out, if you can imagine here, we're actually out over top of you, holding this chord with this backlighting. It's absolutely amazing.
And so when you play that quartet outside of the theater piece, has it changed?
Yeah, this is interesting. I mean, after doing a couple of runs of that, we did it in London, we did it in New York, we did it in Moscow, which was interesting, Paris. We happened to be playing it in a concert in London, and Simon was directing a play at the South Bank in another theater. And he came over to our rehearsal to say hi, and I said, "Simon, we've played this now probably 50 times in the Noise of Time, and then we come and we play it on stage, and we're sitting here, or standing. At that point we were standing, but we're clumped in the middle of the stage, and it just feels so. Do you have any idea what without getting crazy, do you have any ideas about what we can do?" And he said, "Ask if they have a computerized dimmer on the lights." They did. So he said, "Okay, about 20 minutes in, first of all, start the piece at 75%. 20 minutes in, have them start a slow dim to the end of the piece, down to about 20%. So every time we've performed it now, since then, we try to do this. And it's so slow that you're not even aware of it. And it's, also we had to play we did play the whole piece by memory. So the fact that the whole thing is coming down is we can still see a little bit, but it's not a big deal. But I just want to tell one quick story about when we did the last 5 Shostakovich quartets at Tanglewood. And I knew we were going to do this lighting thing with the 15th.
Yep.
Okay, so we start, I think it's around 7 o'clock, and we play the 11th and 12th quartets. 11th was the one we were playing in the film. And then there's a break, right?
Yeah.
Well, from 11 to 12, the sun is, starting to set. I mean, it's not dark, but it's starting to, you feel the sun setting. And then we come back after, a relatively short intermission and do 13 and 14. And during 13 and 14, the sun sets. And it's an outdoor, it's like this, if you've been at Tanglewood, you sit, some people are sitting out on the lawn. So by the end of the 14th, it's dark outside. Then we come out and do the 15th, and we do the lighting thing. And I didn't even think of that, I was like, oh my God, this is brilliant.
Right. So just, you've touched a little bit on something that, one of my pet peeves, which is, so we hold this music, the string quartet tradition holds this music like the cavatina up on this pedestal. And I don't know how this started, but the idea of bringing any staging element, lighting cues, was really frowned upon. I mean, how could you do that? This music clearly doesn't need it, and to do that, it was kind of, so much of what we were seeing growing up was, that was kind of selling out. That was making it pop. And then you go see and the amount of care around every specific lighting cue meant to heighten some. I'm like, well, how come they get to do that? That doesn't make sense. So maybe the extreme example of that, of where quartet comes, is you'll see later in the week when we have the great Kronos Quartet.
David's here, right?
Right, and David's here. And okay, David, just so you know, we almost didn't have enough lights left in the theater for the string quartet competition lighting cues, and I only asked for 3 cues because there's such interesting and comprehensive demands on that show. Now, that particular show has maybe more lighting than others because of the film, but the interest in bringing all the tools that you have to heighten the experience, I think, is really extraordinary. And I think we will see where, is there a more boring thing to look at in the world than any symphony orchestra concert? It's just astonishingly bad. No, let's be, it's astonishing. And these are orchestras, across the world, there are orchestras, that's what they do. They do live performance. They don't have lighting directors. No. That's just, can you imagine? No lighting director. So we have lots of catch-up to do. So I'm always amazed at when classical music is embedded in some sort of theatrical project, how that affects the actual music.
And what the Kronos has done is it's extraordinary and extremely admirable and amazing, and breaking down barriers, creating barriers to break down. I have all the respect in the world for what they've done. I think the kind of things, even just being aware of how you, and I don't mean this in a vain way, but just being aware of how you look from the audience. I think I know all along we go out, somebody goes out and looks at it. And so, there's a lot of light coming down. You look like zombies. You have to have the light. You don't want a lot of light right in your eyes, okay? But you have to, you use the light in some way. We were the ones that discovered that there was the conductor's light at Tully Hall, in the old Tully Hall, that made a pool of light right in the middle of because Miss Tully loved her hall, and she loved it when it was just very dark and impressionistic, and the doors would be open and you could see the organ in the back. And, I would sit out in the hall and I'd go, God, no wonder people are so sleepy here. I mean, it's just, you know, it's just like, and so it was like, there's no other light here? And there's just the conductor was like, well, turn it on. There's like this pool of light. And so then we started using it, and people started commenting about, you know, your concerts are like, it's really interesting. There's like such a focus, you know, in the middle of the stage. And he's like, yeah.
But
I mean, that's a very, very subtle thing, but it makes a big difference.
But I think there's such amazing opportunity to learn from, you know, from the other artists, the choreographers, the lighting designers, the playwrights. We had a few summers ago when I was working in the training programs here, we brought Mark Morris, the great choreographer, not to teach dance, but to work with the musicians. Because he hears the same, I mean, he's choreographed a number of the pieces he was coaching, and so he hears the music in a completely different way, and the sense of timing is different. And it was enlightening, you know, for the musicians to see music through the eyes of another art form. Really, really stunning. Okay, I know I promised we would start on time. We will end on time too, and I want to save time. Want to save time for some questions. So. We have a few runners, I think, with mics, and we'll take some questions before.
While they're doing that, I just have to tell a quick story about this mic. Teaching years ago with Isaac Stern at Carnegie Hall, and Henry Meyer, who was the second violinist of the LaSalle Quartet, and taught for many years in Cincinnati Conservatory, was also a survivor of Auschwitz, and when we were in Jerusalem together, we were working with a lot of young players, and we went to visit the Yad Vashem, and we didn't go with Henry, but he came over later, and of course, as you do in Israel, you have your sleeves up, and these kids had been working with him, you know, all week. And then there he was, and we were in that room where it's like you're sitting in the middle of the square of Auschwitz, and you're looking around, and he's telling us, that guy was a real son of a bitch. I mean, he was the devil, but this one kept as many of us alive as he could, and he kept me alive not because I was a violinist, or you know, he might have partly been that, but he kept me alive because he told them that I was the only one that could polish my boots properly, and he's telling these stories. You know. Anyway, that's Henry, and we were very close all the way to the end. He was hit by a car and in the hospital for months at the end of that, and we spoke on the phone a lot. But one of the times we were teaching. We had been told, you know, be careful because these things are live. So if you leave the stage, you know, make sure that you. So we're sitting there, and Henry has to go to the bathroom, and leaves. God. And we're sitting, and this is in Carnegie Recital Hall, and it's open, public, you know, sitting there, and all of a sudden you start hearing. And you know the sound, and Stern goes, "Go!" Somebody goes running, you know, to the men's room to turn the thing off. Anyway, so whenever I wear these things, I think of Henry.
Oh, that's hysterical. You introduced us to Henry. Henry was amazing.
Yeah, he was incredible.
He was amazing. One quick story about Henry that was amazing for us.
He had this.
Oh yeah.
You finish playing and we go. But do you own the bow? Yeah, my parents. But you own the bow, right? I mean, your family owns the bow. Yes. Do you own the whole bow? Yes, I think so. But then why don't you use the whole bow? It's great. Teaching slightly at the expense of the students, but it was.
But no, Henry also worked in quiet, mysterious ways. He came to Juilliard one year to give some master classes, and actually he arranged for a donor to underwrite the string quartet residency program. That was a big purpose of his trip. Even though Henry was not teaching at Juilliard, he did this. And so he came there, we played for him. And I didn't have a great violin. Henry asked me about the violin. He doesn't say anything. Boom. Don't know anything happened. Go away, go through the summer, come back to Juilliard the next year in the fall, and I see the dean. And to be honest, I don't really speak to the dean because we're in a kind of separate string quartet program, and the dean comes right up to me. I'm like, uh-oh. He goes, come with me to my office. I'm like, oh, God. Like, what's happening? And he goes, I understand you need a violin. And I'm like, and you have to understand, there's a hierarchy at Juilliard, and let me tell you, string quartet is not at the top of the hierarchy. It's, the next Joshua Bells and all of, and there are lots of them, and so there's an incredible instrument collection at Juilliard, but it primarily goes to, so he goes, President Polisi wants you to choose a violin. So I'm like, well, okay, so we walk to the vault, and there are like 50 violins, and there's like, not one, there's like Strads, Guarneri, and I'm like, I did to choose one, and I thought, oh, God, what? So and that was because of Henry. Henry called and said, that guy needs a violin.
Good.
So I got an unbelievable instrument for like the next 2 years because Henry quietly worked his magic.
Yeah, that's great.
He's an amazing
That's a
guy.
great story.
Okay, quick questions for Mr. Setzer, who is with us all week, by the way. Yes. Let's get the microphones. Are
Back.
there microphone runners? Are there any?
Can't see them.
I'd like to know how you and Gene Drucker decide who's going to play first on a particular piece.
The most asked question
Yep.
of my life. Yes. That and what time can we have dinner tonight? Okay. No, that's actually was one of the easiest things that we worked out. Both Gene's dad and my dad played second violin in quartets. Gene's father was in the first violin section of the Met Opera Orchestra for many years as an assistant concertmaster, and my dad was in the Cleveland Orchestra as assistant principal second violin. But they also played in string quartets. My dad was in a very good quartet called the Symphonia Quartet, made up of orchestra members. And Ernst Drucker was a second violinist in the Bush Quartet after the war for a couple of years, and then got the job at the Met and did that with his career. But I think we both had not just an appreciation for the second violin, but a real love for the second violin. Like most student quartets, at least at Juilliard, you had to switch. Every quartet did that because you had to learn how to play a supporting role, play the second violin. You played second in St. Lawrence, so it's a very special skill. And it's one that we wanted to do. It wasn't just that we both wanted to play first violin, and it also enabled us to do more repertoire. But we basically just divided everything down the middle, even before we had played the pieces. Half of the Opus 18s. He decided he wanted to do 3 of the 5 middle quartets, and I would do 3 of the 5 late quartets, half the Bartoks. It was just like, you take this one, I'll take this one. So we've never switched on anything. We always play the same parts, and I think it was, for us, it was a way also of, it wasn't, actually, to be honest about it, it was just a natural, sort of organic process for us. Robert Mann said to us, it's not going to work. You have to decide what role you're going to play. We tried it, it didn't work. And Gene and I talked about it, we talked about it with the other guys, and we just decided, for us to make a decision at this point, because we'd been together for a few years already as students, it would have been unnatural. Yeah. So we just decided to keep doing it. And Bobby Mann heard us years later, I think at our 15th anniversary or something, and pulled us aside and said, I was wrong. You make it work. And I think it's as much, if it works, it's as much because we both can play second violin as it is that hopefully we can both handle the first violin parts. Because I think there are a lot of groups where you have a very strong first violinist. Juilliard Quartet is a good example. I cannot, as much as I admired Bobby Mann, I cannot imagine him playing second violin. It's just, you know, it's not his, it's not, it wouldn't have worked, or, you know, as well anyway.
Yeah, good.
So, but that's it, basically. And then when we learn new repertoire, it's like, we're learning 2 new pieces this year, you take that one. So we try to even things out.
Question over here.
I just wanted to affirm your recognition of the importance of lighting. It brought back, as I filed out of my memory, an experience of hearing the Borden in Toronto in the 1990s.
Yeah.
They did the last 3 Shostakovich string quartets by candlelight. By the end of the 15th, the candlelight was gone.
Yeah, yeah, I
And
know.
it's, what an
Yeah, it's
experience.
amazing, I know.
That was a simpler way of doing it.
Yeah.
How they managed to get those candles to burn to the exact point. I don't know.
Yeah.
But my question has to do with your experience in standing in string quartet playing.
Right. We stood, all right, let's see. We sat for 25 years. And we stood, for our 25th anniversary, we played 3 tiny little concerts in New York. We played, first concert was 6 Haydn quartets, 6 of our favorite Haydn quartets with 2 intermissions. Second concert was the 3 Opus 59 Beethoven. Third concert was the 6 Bartók quartets with 2 intermissions. But it was actually the Haydns that, and it was David Finkel said, you know, because he used to play in the what's it called? The Philadelphia Chamber Orchestra, I think.
Okay,
And a lot of chamber orchestras stand. And he was sort of watching Gene and me, you know, struggle with the Haydn first violin parts, which we all struggle with because they were like concerto parts. And he said, "You guys look so uncomfortable, you know. Maybe just for the Haydn concert, why don't we try standing up?" And yeah, sure. Like it's so much easier to play standing up. Yeah. So, and then we went through this whole thing like, oh, what are people going to say, you know, and then, you know, like it's going to be gimmicky and all that stuff, you know. So we like invited all these people to come, and we did this whole thing of playing the same music standing and sitting, and everybody said the same thing. It sounds better standing up. Yeah. So, okay, for the next 15 years, we stood up and put David on a platform, and I think it was great. I mean, I enjoyed it a lot. I think there were many things, because you get away from the early reflection of the floor. It sounds better. It is definitely easier to play the violin standing. I had knee trouble for a couple of years and ended up having a knee replacement, and so I couldn't stand for a while. But now I can. But I think when Paul came into the quartet, we had been standing before, and he was fine with trying anything. Right. But I think I think just in general he felt that it was equally good to be sitting and being, you know, just sort of being on the same level. And I think also he wasn't. Sometimes it was fine with the platforms, but sometimes the platforms were a little narrow, or it just. So he felt more. Yeah,
we had it the last
relaxed.
time. We've had groups stand, as you've probably seen in some of the. I mean, once you guys stood up, a lot of quartets stood up.
Yeah.
Interestingly, that now you're sitting, and none of the quartets are standing this year. So, not sure what that means, but.
I don't know. I mean, it was nice though, also because a lot of the chairs are not great, and you know, they're not high enough. But at this point, I'm enjoying sitting.
Right.
So for a long time, when we were standing, I would practice sitting down and then stand up and play the concerts. Right. Now I practice standing up.
Right. We have time for one final question. Anybody? All right. Oh, yes, there is one. Yes, Chris. Oh, no, Chris, sorry.
I was just wondering if you ever had to deal with injuries from playing.
Yeah. Sure. We've had, over the years, I mean, it's that many years, you're going to have some problems with it. David had some back trouble for a while and couldn't play. We did a whole tour with playing with a different cellist. Gary Hoffman played with us a bit, Ralph Kirschbaum. And Colin Carr, filled in. We also had a situation where Larry had a rotator cuff surgery, and Gene played viola, and we did piano quartets with Gil Kalish and Wuhan and some other pianists. So yeah, over the years, I've been actually pretty lucky. I haven't really missed too many concerts. I had to miss one when I had the surgery, but I work very hard myself, going way back to when I was at Juilliard and injured my hand. I had tendonitis second year at Juilliard, and I worked with a person that was recommended by the doctor. Said, she's just starting out in physical therapy, but I've heard that she's very good, and I've met her. I like her. Her name is Carol Johnson. It's Carol with a Y. Mm-hmm. Well, the Carol, or I guess it's called the Johnson Hand Clinic, is right near Juilliard now, and she's still practicing. She's, I'm 68 now. She's probably into her mid-70s, something. Yeah. It's still the place to go for any kind of upper body and physical therapy, and I still do these exercises she gave me, again, almost 50 years ago. I have one of these TheraBands, this stretchable thing, and this putty, and my wife just fell and broke some bones recently, and she's doing okay now, but she's been doing, physical therapy with these new contraptions, so I'm trying these new things and we're having a little physical therapy time together, But I do it, not because I'm injured, but as preventative. But I also show my students some of these things, and the TheraBand weighs nothing, so it's easy to carry with you. Yeah. But I think we are athletes, and it's not just the question of getting older and having some arthritis or something like that, because a lot of the injuries happen to young people, and I think when you're young, like the time that I injured myself, I was probably 20, and even though you go through puberty and you think you're finished growing, your body is still making adjustments, and I think that's partly why a lot of young people get injured, is that the tendons are still not completely set, and this is a really stupid position to do something in, you're just asking for trouble. There's a nerve here, there's nerves here, there's carpal tunnel, the neck. It's crazy. It's amazing that we can do it at all.
It is amazing. Phil, thank you. Thanks for this talk. Thanks for being with us for the week.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be with you. I just want to say very quickly in closing how special this guy is and how lucky you are to have him.
Thanks. All right. Thanks, buddy.